Of the two sons in the parable we just heard, it's unfortunately true that the second son commands the most attention in our world and sometimes even in our church. There is something perversely fascinating about hypocrisy. We love to uncover hypocrisy, to point it out, and to condemn it. This capacity to identify hypocrites is one of the earliest critical capacities we develop in late adolescence and as young teenagers, often first in our parents. But you don't eat Brussels sprouts, Mom and Dad. Sadly, the world is largely stuck in this attitude when it comes to matters of faith, when it comes to the Christian faith in particular. In literature and in movies, when Christian people are portrayed at all, they are often portrayed as holding high morals and saying pious things, but not living up to them. This morbid fascination, this sullen satisfaction in pointing out hypocrisy, sadly exists within the church as well. There are many Catholic commentators who write articles and tweet tweets and create videos highlighting new hypocrisies in the church. Aha, I caught you. This fixation on hypocrisy is to be stuck in the second half of the parable. It's to be obsessed with the second son and ignore the first son. And brothers and sisters, it is the first son that the Lord Jesus desires us to marvel at. He, of course, initially says no to his Father's request that he work in the vineyard. But then, as Jesus laconically describes it, he changed his mind. In those few words are embedded a great and marvelous mystery. It is the mystery of conversion. It is the grace that God pours into hearts to turn them away from sin and to himself. The truth is, other people's conversions are meant as a gift to us. The miraculous change that God effects in other people's lives is meant to change us as well. Other people's conversions are meant for us, and we are meant to marvel at them. This is why the Lord Jesus rebukes the high priests and the scribes. They have seen with their own eyes tax collectors and prostitutes turning from their old way of life and embracing God. They have seen this marvel and they are unmoved. God's kingdom shines through these transformed lives. But the high priests and the scribes are impenetrable to it, and they remain in darkness. How do we avoid their error? One way is to become more fascinated by conversion stories. One way is to read other people's conversion stories. Perhaps the most famous is St. Augustine's Confessions, but there are many, many more testimonies to the way God has transformed hearts. There's Thomas Merton's 7-Story Mountain, Dorothy Day's The Long Loneliness. There's a whole series on EWTN called Coming Home that invites people who have converted to the faith to share their story. Read those books, watch those shows, listen to those podcasts. More importantly and immediately, if there are people in your lives that have experienced conversions or reconversions, ask them to tell you about it. And marvel at the ways, subtle and not so subtle, that the Lord has employed to untie the knots of resistance in us and open our hearts to His grace. To fail to do this is to risk becoming like the second son. When we are absorbed by other people not living up to what they profess, when we are constantly on the lookout for hypocrites, we are on the path to becoming one ourselves. We are in this house of God tonight, and in many ways we profess our hope in Jesus. But if out there in the world we act as if Jesus had abandoned His church, and all we see is the way that people fall short, then we are hypocrites. In our second reading, we hear what is known as the Philippians hymn. Though He was in the form of God, the eternal Son emptied Himself and took the form of a slave. God the Son emptied Himself to fill us with His divine life. And that divine life flows into us through the transformed lives of those around us, through the conversions that God works around us. Those conversion stories are meant to shape our story. Those conversions are meant to advance our conversion and open our hearts to receive more of that life that Jesus emptied Himself to give. May that fullness flow into us from the transformed lives of others, and may still others be transformed by the witness of our conversion as well.